All right, I think we're live. You know what it's like. Apologies, folks, for being a few minutes late. We're in cyclone region here, and we had power out this morning, but it got back, thank goodness. That was just to my whole town. 2,500 homes had no power this morning. So we're still, yeah, and the cyclone is slowing down, but it's still the same intensity. So it's going to hit here later than expected, which means we're just going to have all these high winds for longer.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How I don't know whether Marti, we probably don't even given the events in the US in the last 48 hours, I doubt whether the tropical cyclone in Australia is getting any airwaves over there.
It isn't.
But it's interesting. It's interesting. It feels COVID-ish here. Mm-hmm. All the shops there's nothing in the shops. Everybody's provisioned for the worst, sandbagging, preparing, all that sort of stuff. So it's it'll be interesting. But what I don't know how we're going to feed this into the conversation, but there's been some really lovely generosity from people who have got their stuff in order, and they're going, okay, what can I do now? And then what they've done is they've gone out and helped their neighbours, or they've gone into the community and helped people who are struggling to get the sandbags together. So that's been a really nice insight into humanity, which we don't. Isn't it funny how disaster brings out the best in humanity? and maybe, Av, when you set the room, we can sort of pull on that thread a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Marti, your volume's a bit low, by the way. Just thought.
Let's see. I don't know what to do about that.
That's okay. Maybe just speak closer to the mic. But
yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Here we are, and Steve and I live in the southeast corner of Queensland in Australia, and obviously, if you haven't been living in a cave for the last week, you know that there's a tropical cyclone heading our way, and so we're just sort of discussing the humanity of these events. And our region has not been we haven't seen a cyclone here for 50 years, but we've had adverse weather. We know what it's like. We've had floods 3 years ago here in my town, my region, and the community is strong. It's an amazing community here. So it'll be interesting to see how we go over the next few days. And it's a gift, I think, that we're here today, because my power did go out this morning from the wind that brought trees down on the power lines locally. So let's get into it, and let's talk PACHA and MUNAI. And Marti, I would love it if you could just introduce us possibly to those concepts, and weaving this into, how we know when we have consciousness in business. And I'll leave it up to Steve to start bringing in his questions.
Yeah. These principles, they're in so many ways, they're very, very simple. But when we start to experience them, the whole world opens up, and suddenly we have everything in our hands. So just a little recap. This principle, PACHA, PACHA means, at its base level, it means a coordinate in space-time. So if you're organized by this principle, you're present, and you're not bound by time. You're not worried about, I have to get there and I'm only here. You're not worried about deadlines. You're not worried about not enough time. You're simply present. And we all know those moments, they feel really good. And very few of us know how to get there. I mean, we all need to learn how to be in that state and live in that state. And PACHA also refers to a timing, a cycle. And of course, everything in life has cycles. Nature has cycles. That cyclone that's coming to you is cycling its way to you, and its timing is changing. It's slowing down, so you're experiencing its force for longer periods of time. And so this term, this principle pacha, when we learn a little more about it and start to do some simple exercises so we can be present, we start to have a different relationship with time itself. And this is very important. Actually, I was in some recent conversations with some of the elders in South America who were talking to us about how busy we are as modern people, and we're rushing around and doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that. And we don't actually have an experience of the world around us anymore. We don't have an experience of what timelessness is, of what a pacha actually is. And we always think we're late, or we have to rush, or are we there yet? And we don't know where we are in our own timings, how they would say it to us. Yeah, and I think this is important in business. If we get caught in a competitive panic, we think, "Oh my God, what do I have to do? Oh my God!" Right? And we're not slowing down, getting organized by pacha. So for a while, we're not concerned about time. In that quote unquote timeless state, we can actually experience our business and what's emerging in a positive way, what we can take advantage of. So we're really talking, when we talk about these principles, we're talking about our states of awareness, what we're focused on, what we're aware of, and how we create meaning. If I'm busy and I'm rushing, I'm creating meaning according to, I'm at A and I have to get to B. It's very linear. It's either or. But when I step outside, like Steve, you've had so many beautiful stories about taking my advice. Just step outside and don't do anything. And all of a sudden, everything is there, right? So that's an example of being organized by pacha. You're simply present. And then the world comes to us and delivers to us what we need. So pacha is very important in that way. And this other principle, MUNAI, these are Quechua language words from the cultures of South America, early cultures of South America. And MUNAI, in ordinary Quechua, it means to like or to love. But the principle is, again, at its basic level, the principle is being aware of everything as it is, with no agenda, no attachment, no judgment, just simply aware, knowing everything. And these two principles, if you learn how to be, I always say, organized by them, right? So you're present, you're unattached, you're really aware. In that state, you'll realize you know what's important. It's given into your awareness. And it's also a state that's free of stress. And so it's a loving state. It's that state where you realize what collective consciousness is, where you realize you're part of something, not excluded from something. And so these states of being, I think, they're so important for business, is we need to understand what our businesses can offer into the collective that we live in. We've got a very different world, and people have different needs. And we live in a different state of emotional response. We've got a lot of very stressful things going on all over the world, from cyclones to other things I won't mention right now. but we need to know how to be present. Yeah, not to immediately defend, but how can we be present in the reality that we have? Yeah, it's really, really important. So one of the things I think we're discussing is steps to learn how to be present in the reality we have. And we're learning what we can do to evolve the reality that we have. It's our world now. It's this one. And I really want to stress that, because a lot of people find out that I'm teaching quote unquote indigenous wisdom. And I say, no, it's human wisdom. It's for everybody. But they think it's something else. No, this is wisdom for us to use for our time. Yeah, and we're not trying to replicate anything that's been before, because that was a different world. So I can't think of two more powerful principles to bring forward to help us be present now and be creative in this world that we have.
beautifully set up, Marty. That's a wonderful recap of everything that we've done. And what it I asked you, a while back, if I was, on this subject, what would I do? And you recommended a book on Australian Indigenous, how the Australian Indigenous people, the Aboriginals, First Nations, how they were, one of, or if not the first scientists, because they read the stars and everything that they lived by the seasons. They planted a crop, or they harvested crop that was growing based on seasons. And so they didn't wear a watch.
Right.
They didn't have a building that opened up at 6 o'clock in the morning, where people went to work. So when you go on holidays, there is, effectively no time constraints around you other than, maybe getting to the park that you're going to camp at and leaving. They're the only two time constraints. Anything else in between that time, you have open time frame, right? So you're not on. There's no time agenda other than what it is that you want to do. So I was just wondering, so I love that concept of being present, being in the moment. There is no tomorrow. There is no yesterday. It's only now. But the reality is that we all wear watches, right? So we started here at 7 o'clock, Australian Eastern Time, and we were apologetic because we were 5 minutes late because everybody was here, right? And so how do we... My first question, I guess, and I'd rather spend more time on the love part, but I think there's a because I think the love part is actually that's where the humanity turns up. The time constraint, the PACHA, I see as a friction point between being present and having to be somewhere, and to do something because of the world that we live in. So I just love your thoughts on, we have this requirement to be at a place at a particular time because that's respecting the other person, right?
Yeah.
So we just can't turn up whenever we feel like it.
Right.
We turn up because we respect each other's time and we respect the audience time. So how does a business owner reconcile that concept of there is things to be done and allow that being present in that moment?
It was interesting inquiry. Oh my goodness. So this is a really good example of our challenge to understand consciousness in the world that we have, right? So if we could dial back time a few, like 10,000 years or something, we could find a nice, very conscious culture living their lives, fewer people, simpler life. There was such a connected awareness that you felt one another's timings. And so there was no need for a watch. And they also lived with, in many cultures, they have markers that mark where the sun is in terms of yearly passages and daily passages. And so there was some marking of time, linear time, if you will. But there was a much closer connection. And so you could say the collective consciousness was stronger and people just moved together because they were aware of one another. And so time was still respected in that way. And a timing it's very, very important. If I have to get from my office to a meeting, I'm going to consider that to be a timing, not a linear pathway. And if I'm organized by PACHA and MUNAI, I'm not going from here to there. I'm more aware right where I am. And the things I need to get done for the meeting are emerging out of me, as is the time I need to leave to get to the meeting, quote unquote, on time. I'm processing more information more efficiently without this linear, oh my God, kind of feeling that we all get. I'm present in my coordinate, and that gets me from one timing to the next to the next. So I get to these meetings, quote unquote, on time. It's a very different way of being in the world. It's a way that's really relaxing. You just be yourself right where you are, and you quit flinging your awareness to some endpoint out there in space, because that'll stress you. Yeah. So being organized by these principles, we don't throw our watches away, but what we do is we create a different relationship to time. In other words, we experience time differently, and we start timing. We live through timings instead of the linear, how fast can I do it kind of timing.
So does that, so in the world of time management, right? So we can't, that's always, it's a misnomer, isn't it? Or, how do you manage time? You can't, right? But what you can do is you can try to, what you can do is you can set times for timing in your day, and allow buffer, what I call buffer time, which is basically, it's going to get filled with something. We just don't know at this point in time. And what that does is it gives you breathing space, and it gives you an ability to slow down, right? Because you're not continually, it's not you're jumping from one boat to the next boat to the next boat, and then all of a sudden that boat is left and you haven't even got halfway, all that, mixing metaphors. But so what does PACHA teach us, that timing part of PACHA? What does that teach us in terms of, being able to slow down and be present and get all of the things that we need to get done in the day that, that we've set ourselves for the day, the week, the year?
If I learn to organize myself by PACHA, I am working at a very different pace. I am, quote unquote, slowed down. I'm not trying to get from A to B. And it's just a different experience. And so, people who are listening, we've actually talked about this in a lot of different ways in our conversations. If you simply give yourself even a minute outdoors, please do this outdoors, although you could do it indoors. Just start with the simplest thing of stop thinking about yourself. Get your awareness off of yourself and be aware of the world around you, whatever it is. It could be a traffic jam. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Get your awareness off yourself and get used to that. Have some sensory experience without naming it, without creating a story in your head, without explaining it. No language, pure sensory awareness around you. And see what happens to you. Right? It'll start to change you. And this time management stuff, every little trick of the trade. I mean, people make careers out of time management. If you go back and look at like David Allen, I think was the guy who was really, really good at that. But every little thing that David Allen prescribed was a trick to focus awareness. That's all it is. So if you learn how awareness works to begin with, you don't need David Allen. Forgive me, Buddha, but you don't need, you'll have yourself. Sorry. You'll have yourself, because in full consciousness, being totally present, your awareness is streaming into the world, which means you are aware of what the world is sending you. And there's a little bit of magic here. If you can achieve that state, you'll know, because it's very relaxing, and you'll suddenly know this now, that now, that now. Whereas if you sat down to think about it, you'd get all stressed. How can I get all of this done? You would be in a part of your brain that doesn't have enough neurons to begin with to deal with all that stuff, nor is it wired for that kind of processing. And so your stress increases. And so we trundle back to our little exercise outside and we get our awareness off ourselves, we start experiencing the world. Your awareness is working in the part of your brain that is designed to process millions of bits of information per second. It does it easily. It creates, it organizes, it pings you with what's most important in the moment. You cannot possibly think your way to this. But it's scary because it's like all of a sudden I'm saying, yeah, just walk out on that ice ridge and there's no handrails, by the way. That's what it'll feel like, oh my God, what do you mean? But just a little play in nature. I'm just really challenging everybody. Just try it out a little bit and see what happens to you.
I can relate to that from I'm a mad keen golfer. Although in the last 12 months I haven't played as much golf as I would have liked to have.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times, and when you talk to elite sports people or people, who have performed at an unbelievable, they've achieved unbelievable feats. Yeah. It's typically they're in that, they call it flow or in the zone. And I remember, I can recall playing a round of golf, shooting the best score. For those who understand golf, this will make sense. For those of you, I apologize. Those of you who don't understand, but I'm a 13 to 15 handicapper, and I shot one over. Best round of golf I've ever, and I had 2 bogeys, which doesn't mean anything to anybody, but I can recall 2 shots in that whole round. Yeah. The rest of the time, it was just I had no I'm thinking back on. I have no recollection of what happened. I just know that I scored those points, and it wasn't me on my own. I had people there. So that sort of while you were talking, excuse me. While you were talking, it felt like when I'm attached to an outcome, there is this pressure that's placed on me. So I think that's a nice segue into the MUNAI concept of being unattached, not having an agenda. And, when we go into meetings, we're meant to be there on time or before time. We're meant to be present in that meeting, but we're also there for the purposes of getting an agenda done. Now, how you run a meeting, there's a whole bunch of, what's the purpose of the meeting, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the times people go into those meetings with an agenda. It's their agenda. So how does MUNAI help in that, walking in, not thinking of yourself, thinking of the other person? What does that allow the business owner and their team to achieve when they all have that feeling or they're being that?
Yeah.
There's a layup for you.
Oh man, I love it. I could talk for an hour or more on this. Okay.
Please.
So, all right. If I've got an agenda for a meeting and I don't know anything about how to use my awareness, when I go into the meeting, my awareness is going to be on the agenda, not what is actually happening. And I'm very likely to just kind of railroad the meeting through my attachment, my agenda points, and leave a whole bunch of people quietly seething. And I'll feel great. Oh, got through my agenda, and a whole bunch of people have not been met. If I could be organized by PACHA and MUNAI, I'm in myself. I'm right where I am. My awareness is right here, but not on my ego. I'm being me, and my awareness is flowing into the meeting to the people there. Yeah, maybe I have an agenda, but I am processing information from those people. I'm giving them one point. Here's kind of what we're here to do, but this is what people say. I'm listening to people, but it's more than just listening to people. My awareness is on them, engaging with them. I'm receiving not just words, but energy. So I really understand them. That's MUNAI. You really get what actually is so. And you're not judging it. You're not making assumptions. You're not erasing anything. You're in that flow. And so in that meeting, you could realize agenda point number 3 is pointless. So you skip over it, or you create a new agenda point, because that's what's happening. And your awareness is not on your ego. You're not judging yourself. This isn't you trying to be a big fancy. You are simply a node of consciousness processing information and creating in the moment. And that's real, because that is what's happening. You cannot possibly predict how people in the meeting are going to respond, what they might think of creatively. You can't set that up ahead of time. And if you really want the juice and the power of your people, you learn to be in this state. It's actually a state of technically what I would call full consciousness. Your awareness is off of yourself and on the room, on the people. And yes, you have, now I'm going to use a different word. In the indigenous traditions, we would say vision. You've got a vision for the meeting, not a strict agenda. You have an idea, an overarching idea of what it's about. And that overarching idea is keeping you kind of on track, but it allows new information in. And so I'm not thinking about the vision. I've got a felt sense of why we're there, but I want to pay attention to what is actually occurring. That's MUNAI. And it makes sense because I'm paying attention to what's actually occurring relative to this vision, which isn't a hardcore carved in stone linear agenda. The vision is negotiable. Yeah, like we're building this project and we're at stage B, and that's what we're discussing. So there might be some stuff that comes in, and, oh my God, stage B, it's more than we thought. If I'm negotiable, if I'm present, if I'm stewarding an exchange between myself and people in the room. That's MUNAI. That's aware of everything as it is. It doesn't mean you're not focused. It means you can focus on what is most important.
I can sense, like, that absolute makes perfect sense to me, because I talk about context, which is not my theory. Context gives content meaning. If you and I don't agree because we have our own opinion, for us to agree on something, we need a higher context. That's something that we both, our own agenda, our own opinions lead into something of a greater good or a greater purpose. So that they're, and there's compromise in that, right? So sometimes you have to give up your opinion, your agenda, to be able to achieve the greater good. That makes total sense to me. But I'm imagining that there are moments in a business owner's life when that process, there's just no time for that, because there is a time right now. We're in the Western world of, there is a something that has to get done for a particular client because it's been promised, and we're in this meeting to get this thing done. And I'm telling you that this is how we're going to do it. I'm not interested in your opinion. So how does a business owner manage their way through that conflict in a caring, loving, generous way, without offending people? Or it's more about how do they communicate then with the people around them and get them on board, even though it may not be that person's agenda. They might feel in conflict with that. Is there an ancient technology that we haven't yet looked at?
Well, there are a number of processes, but I want to back up a little bit. If I think the business owner in this scenario that you've painted, if you are awake enough, if you've been working on your own awareness and you realize, okay, this is a constraint of the Western world. We didn't get where we wanted to go. We got to deliver this. That I would talk to my team in the most positive language I could find. I wouldn't allow conflict over this. It's not a situation of conflict to begin with. Yeah. The Western world, is so much my idea versus your idea that if I'm, as a leader, I'm kind of in that frame. Oh, I got to put my idea across to these people. I'm setting myself up and my team up for conflict. But it's not a conflict. It's a situation. And so for the business leader, you simply describe the context. Okay, here's the context we have. And here's what we envisioned. Let's keep some of those good ideas. Here's what we're going to have to deliver if we want a paycheck today. And get everybody, I would try to help everybody learn something from it, but not put it up as I'm saying this and I don't want your input. Just don't set up conflict in the first place, because everything is collective and everything is an investment. And not every seed you plant blossoms into total fruition. That's life. Right. And if I'm actually organized by these two principles, that would be my natural way. I wouldn't have to reason that out.
Yeah, that's love, right? So that's it's coming into it with not a. So there's the pressure. There's the pressure of the moment. There's the pressure of having to achieve something.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether I come to that with an aggressive, let's get it done agenda, versus we have a collective issue here.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. I'm framing it because I'm the leader of this organization.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we, as a collective, what are the options that we have to resolve this?
Mm-hmm.
And be quiet. Allow the collective. So then it's listening, and allow the collective to, and then that's a generosity of your time, then, isn't it? So you're not putting some level of a pressure or influence over what potentially could happen, and therefore that means that creativity flows.
It flows
because then people feel safe to express themselves and.
And I would even set up a protocol for those kind of situations, because they happen.
Yep.
They do. People or clients are not necessarily always reliable, and things happen. And I mean, I was a designer that kind of thing happened all the time. And so you set up a protocol with your staff. Yep. Here's the situation. Let's do some cool learning, and let's agree on what we're going to send the client, and let's keep going. So everything is blossoming.
Every business is different, but every business is the same. And I talk about, you need a code, you need a language, your internal, your internal code that, everybody's got their own way of, the inside joke and all of that. So it's an internal language. Well, where you come into a meeting and this is give it a name, give it a label, give it something that everybody knows that's what that purpose of the meeting is.
Yeah.
Great conversation, guys. We need to wrap this up. 33 minutes, 33 seconds. I think that's quite perfect. Now, thank you for the listeners, for those who waited and were, and I know you would have been grateful for waiting and listening to that fascinating stuff. And we're going to go offline into the back room and apply this to, we're going to ask some questions, Steve and myself, about, us, real life, how we can apply this. So that's us. Now, if you want to get access to the backroom conversations, then you've got to just join the community. And it's free. The links are there in the 6 Star LinkedIn page. It's very easy to do. Marti and Steve, what would you like to set as our conversation topic for our next chat? Where would you like to go with this?
Well, the next principle in the collective might be the principle Aini, which is all about how we craft relationships.
Okay.
And how we steward. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That's what it will be. Thanks,
Okay.
folks. We're going to go off into the back room now, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care.